August 13th, 1596, the city of Prague. A man named Jan Solfest hangs on a wooden frame in the middle of the market square. His skin is being slowly cut away in strips, starting from the ankles, moving upward. The executioner works carefully, almost surgically. The spectators stand in silence. Jan is still alive. He will remain alive for another 4 hours. Each new cut exposes muscle tissue, which begins to dry out and contract in the open air. Nerve endings, stripped of their protective layer, react to the slightest gust of wind as though red-hot iron were being pressed against them. This punishment was called flaying. On the pain scale, only 60 points out of 150. Only. Because there exists punishments so monstrous that even being skinned alive seems like a quick deliverance by comparison. Stay until the end to find out what reaches the 150 mark. I warn you, this material is not for the faint of heart. Humanity spent thousands of years inventing ways to inflict pain. Not to kill, specifically to torment. The difference is fundamental. Killing is a period. Punishment through pain is a process. And the longer that process, the more elaborate the mechanics of suffering, the higher the score on our scale. Today we will travel from the lower boundary to the absolute maximum. Each successive case will be worse than the last. Each successive point harder to bear. Let us begin with ancient Rome. 1,000 years of imperial history left us dozens of documented methods of punishment, but one of them stands out for its mechanical simplicity and monstrous effectiveness. We are talking about the furca. September 23rd, 71, BC, Capua, southern Italy. The revolt of Spartacus has been crushed. 6,000 captured slaves are lined up along the Appian Way, from Capua to Rome. The distance, approximately 200 kilometers. Each of them is to die on a cross. But before crucifixion, the furca. The furca is a wooden beam weighing between 20 and 35 kilograms. It was placed on the condemned person's neck, and the arms were tied to the ends of the beam with ropes. In this position, the person was paraded through the entire city. Guards walked alongside and delivered blows with whips across the back. A Roman-style whip is not simply a leather strap. At the end of each tail were attached lead balls weighing approximately 15 grams, or bone hooks. Upon impact, they dug into the flesh and tore out chunks of muscle tissue. The historian Josephus described the consequences of Roman scourging as follows. The bones of the spine became visible. This is not a metaphor. With 39 strikes, which constituted the standard quota, the area of damage to the back reached 70 to 80%. Skin, subcutaneous tissue, muscles. Everything was reduced to a bloody pulp. But the furca is only the beginning. After scourging, crucifixion. The hands were fixed with nails 13 to 18 centimeters long. The nail was not driven through the palm. This is a common misconception. The palm could not have supported the weight of the body. The nail entered the wrist into the so-called space of destot, a gap between the small bones of the wrist. In doing so, it grazed or completely destroyed the median nerve. This is one of the three main nerves of the hand. Its damage causes what is known as causalgia, a burning, unceasing pain that does not subside for a single second. The feet were fixed with a single nail through both heels or through the metatarsal bones. The body hung at an angle at which the chest was in a position of constant inhalation. To exhale, the person had to pull themselves up on the pierced wrists or push off with the pierced feet. Every exhalation is a movement. Every movement is the friction of iron against destroyed nerves. Death came from asphyxiation, suffocation, but not immediately. The average duration of agony on the cross ranged from 6 hours to 3 to 4 days. The record, documented by Roman sources, 9 days. 9 days of uninterrupted pain, thirst, convulsions, and slow suffocation. 6,000 people along the Appian Way. 6,000 crosses. Marcus Licinius Crassus ordered that the bodies not be taken down. They hung for months, as a warning. On the pain scale, crucifixion with preliminary scourging, 35 points. That is a lot, but it is only the beginning of our journey. However, you need not travel to ancient Rome to find systematic infliction of pain. It is enough to move to medieval Europe, to an era when torture was not a punishment, but a legal procedure, officially sanctioned by church and state. March 12, 1310, Paris. A knight of the Templar order named Bernard de Vado stands before an inquisitorial tribunal. He is 53 years old. He refuses to admit the charges of heresy. The tribunal issues its ruling to subject him to interrogation of the third degree. Interrogation of the third degree is strappado. The hands are tied behind the back. A rope is thrown over a beam beneath the ceiling. The person is hoisted into the air by the arms wrenched backward. The weight of the body, in Bernard's case approximately 75 kilograms, falls upon the shoulder joints in an unnatural position. Ligaments stretch, joint capsules tear. The humeral bones come out of the joint sockets. This is called bilateral dislocation of the shoulder joints. Pain from a dislocated shoulder is rated in modern medicine at a level of 8 to 9 out of 10. Here, two dislocations simultaneously under load with no possibility of reduction. But this is the basic level of strappado. The enhanced version involved tying additional weight to the legs. Lead weights of 20 to 50 kilograms. With a total load of 100 to 125 kilograms on the dislocated shoulder joints, the ligaments did not merely tear, they detached from the bones. Cartilage tissue was completely destroyed. The joints turned into sacks of fragments. But the most terrifying detail of strappado is the drops. The person was raised to a height of 3 to 4 meters, and then the rope was suddenly released. The fall was stopped by a jerk, an instant before hitting the floor. The inertia of the body during such a jerk created a load 4 to 6 times exceeding the body's weight. For a person weighing 75 kilograms, this is the equivalent of 300 to 450 kilograms applied to the shoulder joints for a fraction of a second. After 3 to 5 drops, the arms ceased to function permanently. The nerve plexuses of the shoulder girdle, the so-called brachial plexus, were torn apart. This meant complete paralysis of both arms for the rest of one's life. Bernard de Vado endured the strappado. He did not confess. Then he was subjected to a second method, the so-called Spanish boot. Wooden stocks were placed on the shin. Wooden wedges were driven between the leg and the stock. With each blow of the hammer, the wedge compressed the soft tissues of the shin. First, the muscles were crushed, then the periosteum, then the bone itself. The human tibia can withstand an axial load of up to 1,500 kilograms. But lateral pressure is its weak point. The bone cracked, split, and the fragments dug into the muscle tissue from within. Every micro-movement, a new wave of agony. Bernard de Vado confessed after the Spanish boot. He was burned at the stake on March 18, 1314, together with the Grand Master Jacques de Molay. The 4 years between interrogation and execution he spent in a cell, with paralyzed arms and shattered shins. The combination of strappado and the Spanish boot, 50 points on our scale. We have risen by 15 points, and yet there exists a punishment even more terrible. Let us move eastward. China, the Ming Dynasty, the 15th century. Here punishment was elevated to the rank of state art, and the pinnacle of this art was lingqi, execution by 1,000 cuts. April 14, 1510, Beijing. The eunuch Liu Jin, former favorite of Emperor Zhu Hozhao, is sentenced to lingqi for treason against the state. He is 60 years old. He is one of the most powerful men in the empire. In 3 days, only his skeleton will remain. Lingqi is not simply the cutting away of skin. It is the systematic removal of soft tissue from a living body according to a strictly defined protocol. The executioner had a diagram, a kind of body map divided into zones. Each zone contained a specific number of cuts. The total number varied from 100 to 3,600, depending on the severity of the crime. Liu Jin was assigned 3,357 cuts. The procedure stretched over 3 days. On the first day, the executioner worked on the chest and arms. Each cut involved the removal of a piece of flesh approximately the size of a thumbnail. The knife had to cut away exactly as much as prescribed. No more, no less. If the victim died before the designated number of cuts was reached, the executioner was punished. Therefore, the masters of lingqi were true experts in anatomy. They knew where the major vessels ran and avoided them. They knew which organs could be touched and which could not. After every 20 to 30 cuts, the executioner's assistant cauterized the wounds with red-hot iron. This stopped the bleeding and simultaneously added a new layer of pain. The temperature of the cauterizing instrument was approximately 400 to 500 degrees Celsius. By the end of the first day, approximately 1,000 pieces of flesh had been cut from Lu Jin's body. He was carried to his cell. According to the records of the court chronicler, the eunuch spent the night conscious. He even ate a little porridge. The body was still fighting. The second day, legs and back, the muscles of the thighs, buttocks, calves, everything was cut away layer by layer. Tendons were exposed, white, glistening, taut as strings. The tendons were not cut. They were needed to prolong the agony. As long as the tendons were intact, the limbs retained their shape. The body remained a body, not a shapeless mass, and the victim could see this. The third day, face, genitals, and internal organs, eyelids, lips, ears, nose, everything was removed in a specific order. The final act was the opening of the chest cavity and the removal of the heart. Only after this was the victim permitted to die. Lu Jin died at the end of the second day. The executioner did not fulfill the quota. Sources differ on whether the executioner was punished, but the fact itself speaks volumes. 3,357 cuts. This could not be completed even on a man who was kept conscious with special decoctions. Lingqi, 65 points, slightly higher than flaying, because the duration, 3 days versus 4 to 6 hours, is offset by the fact that each individual cut is less painful than the continuous removal of skin. But the cumulative volume of suffering is colossal. And yet this is not the limit of the scale, far from the limit, because until now we have been speaking of punishments where pain was a byproduct of the body's destruction. But there exist methods where pain is the sole objective, where the body is minimally destroyed, but suffering is maximized. And it is precisely such methods that occupy the top positions on our scale. The Persian Empire, the 5th century BC, the method that the Greeks called scaphism. The historian Plutarch described it in his life of Artaxerxes II, and this description haunted scholars for 2,500 years. 401 BC, a soldier named Mithridates committed an act that cost him his life, but not a quick one. He publicly declared that it was he who had killed Prince Cyrus the Younger at the Battle of Canossa. The problem was that King Artaxerxes II wished to claim this honor for himself. Mithridates was sentenced to scaphism, 2 wooden boats of identical size. The condemned was laid in one of them on his back. The second was turned over and placed on top, like a lid. Holes were cut in the sides for the head, arms, and legs. The body was enclosed inside a wooden cocoon. Only the limbs and head protruded. Then the preparation began. The victim was force-fed a mixture of milk and honey until severe diarrhea set in. The same mixture was smeared on the face, hands, feet, and genitals, all the parts of the body that were exposed. After this, the contraption was set afloat on water, on a stagnant pond or swamp. The milk and honey in the sun began to ferment. The smell attracted insects. Flies laid eggs in every fold of skin, in every opening of the body. Ears, nostrils, corners of the eyes, anus. Inside the wooden cocoon, feces accumulated, the result of the forced feeding. In this environment, larvae developed rapidly. Within 24 to 48 hours, maggots hatched from the eggs. They began to feed, not on dead tissue, on living tissue. They penetrated under the skin, into the muscles, into the natural cavities of the body. The process was called meiasis, the infestation of living tissue by fly larvae. Mithridates spent 17 days in the boats. 17. Plutarch writes that when the upper boat was finally removed, the body was teeming with worms. They were everywhere, under the skin, in the muscles, in the abdominal cavity. The internal organs had been partially consumed. But Mithridates was still alive. He died only after he was extracted from the boat. 17 days. Imagine this. You lie motionless. You feel something moving inside your body, under the skin, in the abdomen, behind the eyeballs. You cannot move. You cannot lose consciousness. because they continue to feed you, keeping you alive. The sun heats the wood. The temperature inside the cocoon reaches 50 to 60 degrees. You are stewing in your own feces, and insects are eating you from the inside. Scaphism, 85 points. We have crossed the halfway mark of the scale. But the most terrifying thing about scaphism is not the pain as such. It is its duration. 17 days is not the record. Some sources mention cases lasting more than 20 days. The human body is incredibly resilient, especially when it is deliberately kept alive. And here we approach an important watershed. Up to this point, all the punishments we have examined were products of antiquity or the Middle Ages. One might think that with the development of civilization, people became less inventive in inflicting pain. This is not so. The 20th century created punishments that surpassed everything the ancients devised, because the torturers of the 20th century had something their predecessors did not: a scientific understanding of pain. They knew how nerves work. They knew which zones of the body are most sensitive, and they used this knowledge. 1937, Japan, Unit 731 under the command of Lieutenant General Shiro Ishii. Manchuria, the city of Harbin, the Pingfong district. A complex of buildings officially called the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department. In reality, the largest biological weapons laboratory in history. Here, experiments were conducted on living people. The Japanese called the test subjects maruta, logs. During the unit's existence from 1937 to 1945, between 3 and 10,000 people passed through the laboratories. Not one survived. One of the experiments had a direct bearing on our topic: the study of the limits of the pain threshold. Test subjects were subjected to controlled frostbite. Limbs were immersed in ice water at temperatures of -20 to -30 degrees Celsius for a specified period. When the tissues froze to a state where tapping produced a sound resembling knocking on wood, the limb was removed, and then rewarmed, rapidly, with boiling water. The process of tissue freezing is painful in itself. Ice crystals form inside cells and rupture cell membranes. But during freezing, the nerve endings also freeze, and the pain gradually subsides. The real hell begins during rewarming. The nerves come alive before blood supply is restored. This means they transmit pain signals but receive no oxygen. They operate in emergency mode and generate the most intense pain signal possible. Add to this the thermal burn from boiling water. Water temperature of approximately 100 degrees Celsius applied to tissues that a second ago were at -20, a temperature differential of 120 degrees. Cells already damaged by ice crystals are now destroyed by thermal shock. Proteins denature. Tissues are literally boiled. The testimonies of survivors, or rather, the testimonies of Japanese doctors who left records, describe the reaction of the test subjects as beyond all limits. People lost their voices from screaming within the first minutes. The vocal cords swelled and ceased to function, but the body continued to convulse, a silent scream that continued for hours. This was not a punishment in the traditional sense. It was an experiment. But the level of suffering inflicted allows us to include it on our scale. 95 points. We are approaching the upper boundary, but we have not yet reached it. A terrible detail of this story: after the war, Shiro Ishii was not brought to trial. The United States granted him immunity in exchange for the results of the experiments. He died in 1959 in his own bed at the age of 67. Not a single day in prison. But let us return to the scale. We have covered crucifixion, 35 points. Strappado with the Spanish boot, 50. Lingchi, 65. Scaphism, 85. The experiments of Unit 731, 95. Each successive level is more terrible than the last, and each time it seems that it cannot get worse. But it can. The next case is a punishment that combines elements of all the previous ones: the duration of scaphism, the precision of Lingchi, the scientific awareness of the 20th century, and something else, an element that was absent from any of the previous cases: the psychological component. When the victim not only suffers physically, but also observes their own destruction, understanding every stage of the process. 1976. Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge regime. Prison S-21, also known as Tuol Sleng, a former secondary school in Phnom Penh, converted into an interrogation and execution center. Over 4 years of existence, from 1975 to 1979, between 14 and 20,000 prisoners passed through it. 7 survived. 7 people out of 20,000. The prison commander, Kang Kek Yew, known as Dooch, a former mathematics teacher, 33 years old at the time of his appointment. He developed a system of interrogation that included 10 levels of treatment. The documentation survived. Dutch was meticulous. Every interrogation was recorded in protocol. Levels 1 through 4, beatings, sleep deprivation, holding in stress positions. Levels 5 through 7, water submersion, electric shock, suspension. Levels 8 through 10, what Dutch called methods of deep treatment. One of these methods is described in the testimony of Van Nath, an artist who survived because Dutch forced him to paint portraits of Pol Pot. Van Nath witnessed how prisoners had diluted acid injected into their veins, not concentrated, diluted to a state at which it did not kill immediately, but caused chemical burns to the inner walls of blood vessels. Imagine this, acid inside your veins. It flows with the blood. It burns the vessels from within, throughout the entire body simultaneously. This is not localized pain, it is total. Every centimeter of the circulatory system and its total length in the human body is approximately 100,000 kilometers, becomes a source of searing, unbearable pain. Victims of this method died within several hours. The cause of death, multiple organ failure. The acid destroyed the walls of the vessels, causing massive internal hemorrhaging. The kidneys failed first. They filtered blood saturated with products of chemical decomposition, then the liver, then the heart. But until the moment of death, hours of pure, all-consuming suffering, without a single second of respite, without the possibility of losing consciousness, because the adrenaline produced by the body in response to extreme pain kept the brain in an active state. 110 points. We have come right up to the summit of the scale, but still have not reached it, because even this method has one property that lowers the overall score, a relatively short duration. Several hours is monstrously long for such a level of pain, but there exists a punishment that combines comparable intensity with a duration of days and weeks. And this punishment did not come from the Middle Ages, not from ancient empires, and not even from the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century. It came from where you would least expect it, from a world that considered itself civilized, from a world that already knew about human rights, from a world in which courts, lawyers, and constitutions existed. But more on that, right now, 1868, the territory of modern Afghanistan. A British soldier named William Bryden, one of the few Europeans who witnessed this punishment and was able to describe it. Although the method itself had existed long before his testimony, at least since the 16th century, the punishment was called the bamboo torture. And before describing it, I must say, I cannot show a photograph of this process. Not because one does not exist, but because even a description of what is depicted in it goes beyond the bounds of what is acceptable. The essence of the method is based on a biological property of bamboo. Certain species of bamboo, in particular the species Philostachys, grow at a rate of up to 90 centimeters per day. It is the fastest growing plant on Earth. Young bamboo shoots are incredibly sharp. Their tips are capable of piercing dense fabric. The victim was stripped and fixed horizontally above a bed of young bamboo shoots. The shoots were sharply sharpened or simply freshly cut. Their tips were natural needles even without modification. The body was fixed so that the shoots pressed against the back or abdomen, depending on whether the victim was positioned face down or face up, and then one simply had to wait. The bamboo grew, slowly, relentlessly, at a rate of approximately 4 centimeters per hour. A shoot pressed against the skin. The pressure built gradually. A plant knows no fatigue. It does not stop. Sooner or later, the sharp tip pierced the skin. Next, muscle tissue. The shoot advanced through the muscles, pushing the fibers apart. This was not a quick knife strike. It was a slow, continuous penetration. Every nerve receptor in the growth zone was activated sequentially. The pain was not an instantaneous flash, and it was constant, escalating, inescapable. The shoot did not go around obstacles. The growth force of bamboo is up to 230 kilograms per square centimeter. That is enough to pierce not only soft tissue, but also cartilage. The shoots pass through the body completely, through the back muscles, through the abdominal cavity, through the internal organs. The process took from 3 to 5 days. The victim remained conscious for most of that time. The reason was the same as with scaphism. The injuries were distributed over a large area, and none of them was immediately fatal. The body continued to function even as dozens of shoots grew through it. During the Second World War, the Japanese used this method against prisoners of war in the Pacific Theater. Testimonies from former prisoners of war exist confirming this. However, the scale of its use remains a subject of debate among historians. In 2008, the Discovery Channel conducted an experiment, without human participants, of course. Ballistic gel, simulating the density of the human body, was placed above bamboo growth. Within 3 days, the shoots pierced the gel completely. The experiment confirmed the physical possibility of this method. 125 points. The bamboo torture is the second to last level on our scale. Duration, up to 5 days. Intensity, continuous, escalating. The mechanism, unique. You are not killed by a person. You are killed by a plant. Slowly, senselessly, indifferently. There is something especially horrifying about this. The absence of malicious intent in the instrument itself. The executioner steps aside. Nature does the rest. The poor person tied above the bamboo bed could see the shoots growing, could feel them pressing against the skin, could understand what would happen in an hour, in 2, in 12. This knowledge is a separate form of torture. Psychological, when you know exactly what awaits you and cannot change anything. And now we have reached the summit, 150 points, the maximum mark on our scale. A punishment that combines everything: duration, intensity, the psychological component, and one detail that makes it the absolute champion of this list. But the most terrifying thing is that this is not an ancient method, nor a medieval one. This is something that happened in the 20th century, in a country that called itself a bastion of civilization. 1945, Germany, the Sachsenhausen concentration camp, the final months of the war. Among the many documented tortures employed in Nazi camps, one stands apart. It has no established name. In the Nuremberg trial protocols, it is mentioned as station, piercing, but survivors simply called it hell. The essence of the method. The prisoner was fixed to a metal table. Thin metal needles were inserted under the skin, into areas with the maximum concentration of nerve endings. The insertion zones were the subungual spaces of the hands and feet, the armpits, the groin area, the perineum, and the mucous membranes of the nose and oral cavity. The subungual space is one of the most sensitive zones of the human body. The concentration of pain receptors here is several times higher than on the rest of the skin surface. Inserting a needle under the nail produces a pain signal of an intensity comparable to an electric shock. But the needles were not simply inserted. Electric current was connected to them. Low voltage, from 12 to 36 volts, enough to stimulate nerve endings but insufficient to stop the heart. The current was delivered in pulses at intervals that did not allow the nervous system to adapt. Each new pulse was perceived by the body as the first. This is the key point. The human body possesses the ability to adapt. Under constant pain, the brain gradually reduces the intensity of perception. This is a defense mechanism. Nazi doctors knew about this, and they found a way to bypass the defense. Variable intervals, variable current strength, variable zones of impact. The brain could not predict the next pulse and could not prepare for it. Sessions lasted 6 to 8 hours, then a break, 4 to 6 hours, then a new session. The cycle was repeated for 3 to 7 days. The victim was kept alive with intravenous injections of glucose and saline solution. They were not allowed to die. They were not allowed to lose consciousness. For this purpose, injections of methamphetamine were used, which was then manufactured by the German pharmaceutical industry under the brand name Pervitin. Imagine you cannot lose consciousness. They will not let you. Chemically, your brain is forcibly kept in a state of wakefulness. And every second, pain, unpredictable, maximum in intensity, in the most sensitive points of the body, for hours, for days. The testimonies of survivors, and there are only a handful, describe a condition that modern psychiatry classifies as complete disintegration of personality. After 2 to 3 days, the victim stopped responding to external stimuli other than pain. Speech disappeared. Recognition disappeared. Understanding of what was happening, it disappeared. Only the body and pain remained. The person as a personality ceased to exist long before physical death. This is 150 points, the maximum of our scale. Not because the physical pain here is the most intense, although it is monstrous, but because this punishment destroys everything: body, mind, personality, simultaneously, systematically, with scientific precision. This method exists at the intersection of the physical and the psychological, where pain ceases to be merely a sensation and becomes the total destruction of a human being. Ancient executioners destroyed the body, medieval ones the body and the will. The executioners of the 20th century destroyed everything, including the very ability to realize that you are human. We have traveled a path from 35 points to 150. From crucifixion to the absolute limit. And if this journey teaches anything, it is this: the human capacity to inflict suffering has no natural ceiling. Every generation found a way to surpass the previous one. Every new technology, from metallurgy to electricity, from chemistry to pharmacology, became an instrument of pain. And perhaps the most disturbing thing is that we do not know where the true maximum lies. Our scale ends at 150, but this is only the maximum of what has been documented, of what has reached us in testimonies, protocols, and depositions. How many methods vanished along with their executioners? We will never know. Here is the question I want to ask you. What struck you more, the physical cruelty of ancient methods, like scaphism, where the victim was slowly devoured by insects, or the cold, calculated efficiency of the 20th century, where pain was dosed with scientific precision? Write in the comments. It is genuinely important for me to know, because the answer to this question says something important. Not about the past, but about ourselves. If you had the nerves of steel to listen all the way to this point, subscribe. Ahead are topics that will require even greater endurance, and I want those who do not look away to be alongside me.